All right, it's been a while. It's early January right now, but I won't be posting this until at least the end of April, and that's because I haven't even done anything yet. Bear is dropping his truck off this weekend for a 4-link and back half, and we're gonna be testing it on the dunes in April. So I could chop this up into like a build series and do a bunch of small videos, I'm sure, but this is gonna be start to finish, so we will be on the dunes running the truck at the end of this video. I met Bear probably about 4 years ago. His truck was mostly stock back then, and it's just become one of those things where it's snowballed, as these trucks typically do. It's become more and more and more over the years, and he's just at a point where he's ready for a pretty big change in the rear suspension of the truck. If you're new here, my name is Paul. I have a business called Off-Season Fabrication where I build parts for and work on mostly Raptors, F-150s. So I'm going to be doing a short course style 4-link on Bear's truck. Coilovers mounted to the axle, links made out of tubing. That's the way we did Elliot's truck. Me and Elliot built his truck together 3 or 4 years ago, and it works really, really well. No regrets with that thing at all. I love that truck, and I think a lot of people do. I would put it smack dab in the middle between a nice leaf spring setup like my truck, undersprung, C-notch, big shocks, and a traditional style 4-link with the coilovers, bypasses mounted on trailing arms. Could we do Bear's 4-link and keep the frame and keep the bed? Yeah, a lot of people do that. His bed is getting pretty rusty, so he wants to get rid of it. And the frame, I would have to C-notch the frame to get the up travel I want. I'd have to cut off all the leaf spring stuff and make it look like it was never there. It just makes more sense to cut it near the cab and to start fresh. Just let me design what I want and do it that way. It's going to turn out better in the long run, I think. And yeah, Elliot's truck is also back halved like that. And no failures. I mean, we built it 3 or 4 years ago. It hasn't had a single failure at all back there. So we could take a lot of that truck, our proven stuff on that truck, and copy and paste it to this truck. It won't be an exact replica or anything like that. There will actually be a lot of differences, I'm sure, and we'll show that stuff when we get to it. So anyway, I'll record again when Bear's pulling in and bringing the truck this weekend. Let's do it. Here it is. Nice weather we're having. You ready, dude?
Oh yeah, I'm pumped.
Alright, truck's in the garage. Today we're gonna pull the bed off. So we gotta pull this bed cage and everything out. But yeah, let's get this bed off of here. Okay, so we got the bed off the truck. Next thing up is I'm gonna make the links. So I was getting the parts out, getting it ready, and I figured I should take a video showing that stuff and showing some of the other stuff that's here. Not everything is here yet, but I can show you guys some stuff. And I also wanted to say, there's a million different ways to do what we're about to do. Everybody has their own opinion. Every shop's gonna do it differently. A lot of it is just personal preference, you know? A lot of this is how I wanna do it. And a lot of it is up to Bear, too. It's his truck and he's the customer, so he's picking a lot of this stuff. Anyway, links. This is 2-inch by 120 wall, 4130 chromoly tubing. This is a FK JMX 16 Heim. The bungs, a lot of this stuff is from Cartech. Bumps. This is a Fox 2x3. Might shorten that to a 2-inch stroke. We'll see. This is a bunch of tabs from Rough Stuff. Link pivots on the frame side are from Cartech. We're using a 200 over 300 spring rate springs, and that brings me to the coilovers. We're using a 3.0 by 16 internal bypass Fox. Compression adjusters. We would have used an 18, but I believe you can only get these in up to a 16. I will be putting a longer rod end on here to get the chassis up where I want it, so it doesn't look all goofy, or I don't have to make the shock mounts lower than I want. He has a Jazz Jeep Speed fuel cell for it. Specifically that cell, because Izzy Fab makes an adapter that allows you to run your stock pump and everything in the cell, which is really cool. Elliot used a cheaper cell, but then he had to buy an external pump, filters, a bunch of AN line of fittings, aftermarket regulator, fuel rails, bunch of stuff that kind of, it all adds up. So again, personal preference. What else? So he has a fuel cell cradle for that cell coming from Kibitech. About 100 feet of 175 tubing, some more 2-inch, some 1.5, bunch of 1/8-inch plating. I think that pretty much covers everything. You guys will see it as the video goes on. But yeah, let's get these links made. Okay, so I'm almost done building the links. I just have this last one to weld. I figured I could show you guys. So I've just drilled a 1/2-inch hole through the tube. Take your threaded bung, slides in, and then I can plug weld the holes and weld around here. Should look something like that when it's done. And then I also got this guy welded up. This goes on top of the diff. It's going to be part of the axle truss. I didn't film it, but these were all 1/2-inch holes. Bear and I drilled all those out to 5/8. So were these. We drilled these out to 3/4 just because I like to use bigger bolts for this kind of stuff. All the tubing is here now. Plating. We're moving right along. Next step tomorrow, I'm going to get the lower links on the truck, so I got to get those tabs on the axle, link pivots, brackets, mounts, whatever, on the frame up there. And then I can pull the leaf springs and cut the frame. So because we're not changing the wheelbase on this truck, it makes sense to use the leaf springs to locate or hold the rear end where it's at as I get the links on there, and then all that can go. As you can see, I got our link tabs done on the axle housing, and the links are on there. So I'm using the link length to tell me where to put the pivots on the frame, which are exactly 55 inches from center of bolt to center of bolt, by the way. Bolted up, put it on there. I have this plate. Let me get this. I plasma cut this plate out that will cover all these holes, like this. And then our Camberg mount will go on top of that. Well, after breaking my neck and my arms from laying on my back and welding for most of the day, the lower links are on the truck. So I'll show you guys. Got my plate on there, got the Camberg mount on there, and these weld to the bottom of the frame as well. Show you the other side. Pretty cool. So that's done. I also cut up some plates for the upper link mounts. I'm probably going to be building a tube cross member from mount to mount once these are on the truck. So this one's already done. See, I cut up some plate to cover these holes up so I have a good spot to weld the tube right here. I think it's time we chop this thing in half. So let's get this wiring out of the way, get the brake lines out of the way, pull the leaf springs off, get the fuel tank out, and let's chop it. My name's Paul. Welcome to Jackass. And just like that, she is cut in half. So our next step will be, I need to get these off of the frame and plate all of that. I need to get these off of the axle, this off the axle, and build our truss with our upper link pivots. After that, I'll put the upper links on, get this thing up to where full bump is gonna be, and then I can build the first step of the back half. So I like to split it into 3 steps, at least in my mind I do. First step being from the cab to the axle. Second step being from the axle to the bumper. Third step being little stuff like bedside mounts, taillight mounts, fuel cell mount. And yeah, I've already welded the upper link pivots to the frame, so I'll crawl under there and show you guys that right now. Here is our passenger side. Here's our driver's side. I will get the frame ready and the axle truss done, and then I'll see you guys then. Voila, all that's done now. Quick and easy, right? I wish. All right, I'll show you guys what we have, starting with the frame. I capped this off with an 1/8 inch plate. The side over here, this plate was already here. There used to be a tube that came off, and it was a bedside mount. I left that alone. All I did was I add some more plating above it to give us a longer landing area here, because there's gonna be a big diagonal tube that lands on the whole side of the frame later. Up top, I finished some of Ford's incomplete welds, and there was a few holes up here that I welded shut, and then I grinded this all smooth to give us a good surface to work off of. And moving to the axle, the shock tabs from the previous setup are staying. All I did was add a plate that ties them together and welded to the axle, and then our bump strike plate went on top of that. And our truss. The truss I built out of 1/8 inch plate and 175 120 wall tubing. I started by doing this rectangle section here and getting our pivot box centered on the rear end. So it's not centered on that tube, because from here to here isn't centered on the rear end, but it's centered on the rear end, and it's centered between our upper link pivots on the frame. So that's good to go. These plates here are just to tie this tube to this tube better, and then I boxed this whole area in with plate. It's nice to be able to move this thing without the drive shaft like this for welding. Oh, and this guy's welded all along the inside too. There's been a lot of welding this past week. But all of that's done now, so next step is get this up to where full bump is going to be, and then I can start building the chassis. Alright guys, pretty big update here. So I got it up to full bump. I got the upper links in there, the drive shafts in, and obviously a bunch more work done too. I worked pretty hard over the weekend. So let's start with this stuff. Bear wants to keep the ABS and everything functional in this truck like factory, so we're keeping all the wiring, we're keeping the dual brake line set up. So that being said, it doesn't really make sense to change everything back here. So this is just the factory bracket, moved down a few inches to be out of the way of the truss, and I just threw some zip tie tabs along the back of the axle here to run everything on. It's not all fastened right now, it's got to come back off for paint anyway, but you get the general idea of how it's going to be laid out. Bear has chosen to run this stuff over here, mount to the upper link, and then up the link into the frame of the truck instead of dangling it between the chassis and the axle. So I'll show that more when we actually do it, but that's how that's going to be. And yeah, this thing's up at full bump right now. I'm bumping it 3 inches higher than it would have been able to with the stock frame in the way. And that's gonna, as much up travel you can squeeze out of these things really helps in the whoop sections and stuff. It helps the truck not kick like a donkey when you run out of travel. So I knew where I wanted this to be, and I knew where I wanted this tube to be. So I want this to be basically right under the back glass here. If it was really low, it would look really weird. So I knew where that was gonna go and that was gonna go. So I took our collapsed length of the shock and was able to figure out what length rod end we needed on here for it to work how I want. So those are on there, that's done. And basically the whole back wall of tubing is done. So there is one tube I want to add down here, but I needed to get it up to full bump first to make sure the links don't smack it or anything. So yeah, let me show you guys some of this tube work. So starting down here, I ended up doubling up our plating right here. I'll be doing 2 tubes off of this when I build out this way. Then I plated the top of the frame and I did our up tubes. So those tubes take some time because you're just sticking a tube there and you got to get it perfectly straight. So I'm using lasers, levels, squares, all that stuff. And then once I got those done, I got this guy on there, got our shock tabs on there, got all of this stuff in there, these guys. This one grabs the whole side of the frame, which I think is pretty cool on that plate we talked about earlier in the video. And then if you come around to the back side here, there's a whole big triangle section with tubing and plate on the back side of the tube. So if we were tying into a cab cage, I don't think that would be necessary. In fact, we probably could have cut the frame like here and just come out with it and not had the vertical set up at all, but we're not. So this has to be strong without a cage, and he could always tie one in later. He's talked about doing a cage, so I think he will cage this truck, just not right now. Tube design is obviously very important. This so far is exactly like Elliot's. I designed it years ago, and it's been plenty strong, so I'm confident in this. I'm not worried at all. We're basically ready to start coming out with it. So we'll start to see some differences because Elliot's fuel cell is right here, and Bear's is going to be right here. So I am going to have to come up with some fresh designs and change some things up, but that's exciting and fun, and yeah, I'll see you guys when I start bringing the tubes out this way. Okay, our whole first section is done now, so let's check it out. I've been doing nothing but cranking tubes out on this thing the last couple of weeks. Got our dual tubes coming off the frame there. Everything's looking really good. It's cool to see it take shape. Ended up getting our cross tube in there that I mentioned in the last video. Next step is to build the bump stops, so I got to do that today, and then I can get the rear bumper in position and design how I want to build to the bumper and how I want to mount the spare tires and the fuel tank. So one step at a time, let's get these bump stops done. So I have our bump stop in position. I've shimmed it with cardboard and paper to get it perfectly square and straight with our chassis tube there, and I've taken this pad off of it. Main reason being because these wear down over time and I don't want this to bump higher later because the pad wears down. Also because that is easier to stand up on its own without the pad on it. Yeah, we could leave the pad on and just drop the axle a 1/4 inch or so and do this, but it's easier without the pad on there. So with parts like this, a lot of times I'll get it in position and then build to it. So now that that's there, I can take measurements and make our tubes that go from there to there. So let's go do that. Alright, those tubes are done and welded. I did this side as well. So now that that's done, I'm going to box it in with plate, just like I did the truss. So we're going to come over here to the plasma cutter. Oh, and the fuel cell cradle is here too. Bear sent it out and got it powder coated. Looks really nice. Alright, let's cut this stuff up. It's in there pretty good. I'll knock down these welds a little to get it to fit better. Alright, all that plating's welded now. Show you the other side. That was fun to weld. I like welding. All the cutting and grinding and prep work before welding is not so much fun, but I do enjoy welding. So that's done. I was in the middle of plating this SVC bumper that we're using, plating over the bolt holes there because I'm just going to weld tubing to it when we get to it, but I ran out of welding wire in the middle of this weld, so that marks the end of today, and I will see you guys when I get the bumper in position and start designing how I'm going to do the rest of this thing. And I have the bumper and the cell in position now. They ended up fitting together nice. I think their proportions work well together. They ended up working out well where the top of the cell is about flush with the top of the bumper, and then the top of the cradle is about flush with the bottom of the bumper, which I like that. That's pretty cool. I already measured full bump. There's plenty of room between the bottom of the cell and the ground. The idea here is that this is going to come in from the bottom and bolt into the bottom of the chassis, so you'll undo all the bolts and just drop it out with a jack if you need to take it out. I have tabs ready to go on here for tubing to weld to, and then all of these holes here I'm going to use tabs like this and just go straight off of the bumper. There's going to be a V or an X of tubing right above this thing, and that's where the spare tire is going to sit. And yeah, I've just been looking at this thing the last few days trying to decide how I'm going to do this tubing layout. A, it has to be strong. B, it has to look good, and C, it has to be something that I'm actually capable of building. So I've drawn out a bunch of ideas here, and it's probably going to end up being one of these, but when I do this stuff, sometimes as you're building it, one thing makes more sense than the other. You kind of figure it out as you go. So I have a general idea, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to spend the next couple weeks doing that, and you guys will see it in a couple of seconds. Check it out. I feel like I'm really starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel now. You can see how the tube design ended up working out. It made sense to me since we had a junction of 3 tubes right here to continue that on, and it all turned out really good. I'm really happy with it. I have a little bit of welding to finish, but I'm about out of gas. I have to cap these off, and the whole center section of tubing needs to be done still, but I need to get the Izzy Fab fuel plate thing in the cell to see what kind of room I have to work around. But there's either going to be some kind of X or V or something right above the cell here, and then the tire will sit on top of the tubing. So the tire will be another 2 inches or so higher than it is right now, and there should still be plenty of room to stack another tire on top of this one if Bear wants to. But I'll get that done, and then it's time to start building bedside mounts. So we're really getting there now. I'll see you guys once that center section of tubing is done. So I had wanted to do just a big X or some kind of big V shape on top of this cell, but by the time I put the tubes high enough to clear our filler neck and our fuel pump wiring and stuff, the gap between the spare tire and the cell was going to get pretty big, and I think it would look weird. So I ended up doing this square structure instead, and still got some triangulation in there, which makes me feel better about it. But yeah, now that that's done, we're moving on. Let me show you guys how I do bedsides. First thing I like to do is measure out where all our fender washers are going to be. Get those drilled through the fiberglass and bolted in. Then we'll use little plates like this. These are from Camberg. I've just bent them up into vise and get those bolted in with regular nuts or nut certs like that. And then I'm using 1 inch by 120 wall tubing. Just get it lined up on all of them, weld to all of them, cut off the excess or whatever, and then we'll get this in position on the truck and build to these tubes. All right, one bedside's on. The hardest part about this whole thing with the bedsides is getting them perfectly straight and square and exactly where you want them, but once they're there, it's pretty simple. We just build from here to there, just make tubes from chassis to our tube that we mounted in there. Up there, I'll go up there. Same deal. We're off a chassis tube and off the frame right there. So now that that's done, I still need to cap this off. I still need to finish all these welds. I got to get our shock reservoir mounts in position, some tabs up there for some lights and stuff, a bunch of little things. And then I got to get the taillights in, build all that. And yeah, we'll keep moving along. All right, so after that bedside was on, I wanted to knock out a bunch of little things before moving on to the other side. So I capped these off and I finished all the welding in this area. I put our mount for our trailer wiring plug right here, and I built a mount for the fuel pump driver module and its ground strap right up there. I put these little tubes in here for the spare tire. Where the tire slides in until those little tubes stop it, and they also center it. So with the strap straight down at the back and more straight out at the front, as you tighten the strap, it pulls the tire forward into those tubes, and it tightens down really nice and it holds it really well. I got our shock reservoir mounts done, tabs for lights up by the cab done, more zip tie tabs for wiring along the chassis done, and I cut the stock gas filler neck down and mounted it in the bedside. I'm going to use that. This thing's going to fill up like stock, and I'll show how I route it and everything when I'm putting this thing together. But then I got this thing drooped out to measure for limit straps, so I got our limit strap tabs done on the chassis and the axle, and then while it was up in the air, I finally cut off the front leaf spring mounts. I got our cross tube between the upper link mounts done, and I got the exhaust back on. That had to be shortened a couple of feet to clear the upper links, and then I got another frame tie-in done on the inside of the frame rail in there too. I got this bedside on, and then I got this thing up to full bump to check for tire clearance, and I ended up having to cut a couple of inches off the inner lip of the bedside for the tire to tuck up in there and clear. And then I wanted to be able to stand back and look at this thing from a distance to make sure the bedsides look right before I finalize anything. So I rolled this thing outside, and I was really happy with how it looked. It was really nice to see this thing in the daylight for the first time and look at all the welding and all the work and everything, and it gave me the motivation I need to get this thing done. So I got it back in the garage, and I got our rear taillight and fiberglass mounts pretty much done and mocked up here. I have to finish the welding, but I mean, it's very solid. And next step is I have to weld the fire extinguisher mount up there, finish the welding back here, pull the bedsides, clean all this up, paint it, and then this thing can be put together for real. So I got this thing stripped down and cleaned up. Tonight, I sprayed primer. Tomorrow night, it's getting paint. Well, I'm glad that's over with. 7 cans of primer and 9 cans of paint later. It's finally time to start putting this thing together. So I'll start with the 4-link and the fuel cell. Then I'll get the shocks on there, and we'll just keep moving on from there. It's been about 2 months, but I feel like I've been working on this thing forever, so I'm really excited to see it get put together, and then we can go have some fun with it. Alright, I got some of the main stuff on there, and I just got the coilovers and the 4-link in last night, so this thing is sitting on its own weight for the first time since when it got dropped off here, and that's really cool to see. It's nice being able to actually tighten the hardware down and know that it's not coming back apart for welding or paint or whatever. It's getting tightened down for real this time. And as far as hardware goes, I like to use grade 8 stuff for pretty much everything on these trucks. Fine thread and locking nuts. Depending on what it is, I'll use a Stover nut or a nylock nut, but always locking nuts. And I also like to make sure the shank or the shoulder of the bolt is the correct length, meaning the threads don't start until after your last tab or after your mounting point or whatever. That's just better for strength and longevity. There's still a bunch of things to do to this, but I'm going to keep working, and when you guys see it next, I think it'll be pretty much done. Alright guys, this thing is finally done, and we have 4 weeks until we go to the dunes, so that's cool because it gives Bear 4 weeks to do whatever he needs to do with the truck, and I've already been driving it for a few days. Everything works, everything feels really good on the road. No lights on the dash, it starts and it goes like a factory Raptor would. And you know, I'm not against getting rid of the ABS and the evap and stuff on an off-road truck, whatever, but Bear wanted to keep everything functional on this truck, and I'm glad we were able to do that, and it really wasn't that hard to do. You know, using that plate or adapter to put the factory fuel pump into the cell from IzzyFab worked out really well. Because the tank is back here, I had to extend everything, so I extended the wiring. I did the evap lines out of just rubber fuel hose, and then for the fuel line, I found some fittings that adapt from the factory 3/8 quick connect to a -6 AN line. So that all worked out really well. I ended up having to extend the ABS wiring and the diff lock wiring to run it down the upper link like he wanted to do. And then he came over and did the brake lines himself. So it goes from the factory hard line on the frame to a flexible stainless braided hose, and then back to hard line on the link, and then back to a flexible line at the diff. I'm really happy with how this truck turned out. I think it came out great. I'm excited to get it off-road and see how it performs. So obviously it should perform really well. We know how Elliot's truck did right out of the box when it was brand new, and it did awesome. So the difference here is this truck has more weight out back with the tank back here, and they have a different brand of shocks. So this has Fox, Elliot has Kings, and even though they're both a 3-inch coilover and they have the same spring rates, they have a very different internal bypass design, and I don't know, are they super similar right out of the box? Is Fox way softer than King or vice versa? Who knows? But I'm excited to get up there and find out, and if it's obvious we need to make a valving change, then we can pull the coilovers apart and do that. But enough talking, let's go to the dunes. I probably should have mentioned it before, but this truck has a dual shock camber kit on the front. We're about to go out on the dunes now and see how this thing does. How's it feel so far, Bear?
Oh man, it's nice. It's like 9-day difference from last year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
We got Bear's truck sitting next to Elliot's now, so you can kind of see there's a lot of similarities, but also a good amount of differences too. The main chassis structure is about the same design, but from here back is pretty different because of the fuel cell location and everything. But yeah, this thing's working really good. It's exciting. Yeah, it takes them pretty good. Yeah, especially for pretty much right out of the box too. We haven't even really messed with it.
No, like, I mean, we just a couple clicks here and there, you know.
Yeah. I like this section here.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm like racing Baja or something.
Yeah. Plus, you can see if people are coming usually.
Yeah.
I'm able to carry more speed.
Yeah, the tires actually are gripped up now.
Yeah. To drive the truck as hard as I did before.
Yeah. It's probably a lot nicer on the rest of the truck too, to not be like just slamming and shaking all the time. That's unbelievably smooth.
Today it seems like when I shift into third, the RPM doesn't drop down enough, or like as much, maybe because I'm taking more wheel speed up.
Maybe you're just driving faster.
Yeah, maybe, because usually I'm never like
Hell yeah, it feels really good.
Yeah, isn't it like way better than before?
Yeah.
And this morning when we first came out, I was like, is the Dune just that smooth, or is the truck just hooked up that good?
I think it's a lot better.
Oh yeah, definitely like 9-day difference from last year. I was worried.
I don't think the truck went conk, once.
I was worried. I'm like, man, all this work that you did and the money I spent, it wasn't going to be like that much better, but dude,
good.
It's way better.
It's a lot better.
For sure.
Hell yeah. Thanks for the ride.
Yeah.
Alright, we're running through some whoops now, and it almost looks like Bear's shocks could be a little softer. We have these things set pretty much in the middle, so we're going to open them up a bit and see what it does. Well, we didn't find a very good jump, but we found this little kicker to play with. That 4-link's working really good. Well, we've been out here a couple hours now doing laps, and we're really happy with how this thing does right out of the box. We messed with the shocks a little bit, but it's ripping. It's crazy how good it's working already. They're super happy. So there you have it. Bear's truck works great for its first trip out. I'm really happy with how the truck performed, and I know Bear is really happy with his truck as well. I'm sure we're going to find some bigger jumps and some bigger whoops to take it through and really test it out later this summer. So if you want to see that, please subscribe, because I plan on making a lot of off-road videos this year. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.